Escaping the spawn of 6b6t is the first challenge that every player has to face, but players have attempted to make this journey easier by building the massive highways leading away from 0-0. One of the highways is known for its unique property though, as the South Highway is actually a canal. It's a massive river that goes for hundreds of blocks and took thousands of collective hours to be built. I wanted to know how long the canal stretched for, as well as why it was built in the first place. When I asked some friends in the community, the answer was a resounding, I don't know. So today, we're going to travel that canal to answer the question, how far does 6b6t's Southern Canal go? As far as why the canal was built, the answer is a lot simpler than it looks. On the oldest Anarchy server in Minecraft, 2b6t, a player by the name of Thebes and Sound transformed the Southern Highway into a canal back in 2014. Since then, it's been more or less a tradition on Anarchy servers, and 6b6t is no different. I'm excited to start the journey, but I was also hesitant as I quickly realized there isn't just the canal, but also a highway that runs above it that isn't flooded. The canal is older, but the above highway is more convenient, so which one runs for longer? Well, there's only one way to find out, so I went to spawn and began the journey. I actually started over 2,000 blocks away from 0-0 as constant griefs have left it so this is where the water in the canal actually starts. With rough currents everywhere as well as tons of withers within the 5,000 by 5,000 spawn area, I elected to use my elytra to fly past the dangerous parts. Now, the Southern Highway has a reputation of being one of the most griefed and dangerous out of all 4 main highways, so I plan to use my boat for some of the journey, but to speed things up and to avoid danger, I'll be using the elytra fly hack. Very early on in the journey, the canal suddenly stops, and the obsidian floor and guardrails are gone. This will actually be a common occurrence, as due to the popularity of the highway, it's a target for griefers. After the water reappeared on the highway, another form of griefing appeared. The canal was built over and filled in. This didn't last for too long luckily, but destroyed terrain, lava casts, and water walls were all prevalent. Around the 8,000 milestone, I found a massive Easter Island head made of obsidian. I didn't find any signs saying who built it, but building it directly on the highway, this could technically be considered a grief. I kept going, flying past massive lava casts and destruction, and what you might notice is the pillars next to the highway. These are from players originally on the ground level that are towering up to the safer highway. At the 10,000 block milestone, I was met with a giant wall of water, and what I can assume was a building was now a pile of floating obsidian. Directly after the milestone, there was a Savior's logo next to a massive statue of Jesus, which is, of course, a reference to 2b6t. The canal continued but was in rough shape. It was essentially just guardrails at some parts, while others had a nice obsidian floor. At the 12,000 milestone, I decided to switch from flying to a boat. This immediately slowed me down as the canal was filled with random blocks that kept getting in my way, as well as flowing water from previous griefs. While this part did take longer, it felt more peaceful to be using the canal like it was supposed to be used, just taking my time in a boat. Unfortunately, only a few thousand blocks down, I was met with a wither directly on the canal, so I had to switch back to the elytra for safety. The 20,000 milestone wasn't too different from others, with a massive lava cast covering the entire thing, but something caught my eye with my ESP turned on. I found activated end portal frames right next to the canal, and all placed beside each other. I wondered who could have spawned these in and how long they'd been here, but I would get my answers sooner than I thought. My storage ESP also told me there was a shulker at the top of the lava cast, and after opening it, I found it to be full of items from one of the server's most powerful clans ever, Lag Gang. This was definitely a surprise to me because I'm actually working on a video about Lag Gang, so to find some of their items in the middle of the canal path was a complete shock to me. For those that don't know, Lag Gang was a clan focused on server crashes and exploits, and while they disbanded back in 2023, it's very possible that they were the reason for the end portals being here, as they would spawn illegal items using their exploits. After leaving the shulker there for someone else to claim, I trusted a sign telling me to take a leap of faith, then immediately found a rest stop inside of carved terrain. After taking a quick look around, I continued on my journey. I wanted to get back in my boat, but withers and blocks filled the canal, so I had to keep the elytra. Right before the 30k milestone, the canal water had actually been drained with sponges, leaving rough waters. This would be a pattern for the next 1,000 blocks, as some areas of the canal were completely dry, while others were filled with cobblestone. The canal returned to normal for a few thousand blocks until the water suddenly stopped. I kept traveling the dried canal before hitting a dead end underground. I couldn't believe it. The canal ended, and there were even signs telling me this was the end at just 36,000 blocks. I held my head low, but even though the canal ended, the highway above it would continue, so I decided to keep going on my journey, but now I'd be looking for the end of the highway. With a new goal in mind, I kept traveling alongside the highway until I met something that completely shocked me. Only 1,000 blocks later, the canal came back. There were stairs leading down from the highway into a second canal. I kept following the new canal, which was in much better shape than the previous version, with less blocks and griefs to stop me. However, only a few thousand blocks later, I ran into an obsidian wall where the two separate highways actually merged into just one. The canal had officially ended right around the 40,000 block milestone. I decided to keep going on the journey of the regular highway to see if there was anything interesting, but my goal had completely changed. I wanted to see the end of the southern highway, even if it was no longer a canal. When I got close to the 50k milestone, the obsidian started getting replaced with netherite blocks, and was actually completely netherite for a good portion of the trip, which just speaks to the oversaturation of the economy. If the community doesn't have any duplication glitches for the next few months, it's very possible these highways will start being harvested for their resources. At the 55k milestone, I started seeing massive chunk errors. We would normally see chunk glitches like this if players had traveled the server on older chunks prior to updates, but the corruption is going in the opposite direction of the highway, unlike what we would expect. This is because these chunk errors are from when the maps of 6b6t and 7b7t were merged. Not all of the world data was downloaded, leaving huge chunk errors across the server, and just adding to its destruction. I would continue to see chunks like this for most of the journey before eventually reaching the 58k milestone, which had a nice wall of map art, some of which I can't even show on camera. Then I made it to the 69k milestone, which was very colorful and dominated by a logo of the Imperials. I kept going until eventually hitting the massive lava cast that was the 100k milestone, and I wondered if I was near the end of my journey. When I hit the 200k milestone, the obsidian highway turned into single blocks, which I assumed was a sign that we were nearly done. The 400,000 block milestone had a brief reintroduction of the obsidian before hitting a lava cast and returning to single blocks. Until eventually, at 672,000 blocks, the highway, which was a single grass path over the ocean, stopped. I checked ahead and found no signs that the highway was continuing. In the middle of the sky, above an ocean, we found the end of the southern highway, which lasted over 10 times longer than the original canal. I left an obsidian block to add to the highway, even just by one block, and placed a sign marking that I had been there. This journey took me both much shorter and much farther than I anticipated. The canal stretched for about 40,000 blocks, while the highway made it to the 672,000 mark. It just goes to show that on a server full of destruction, some players are choosing to create.